The conference room fell silent after I finished my presentation. 20 pairs of eyes stared at the screen showing my quarterly cost-saving proposal. I'd spent 3 weeks analyzing departmental expenses, identifying redundancies, and calculating potential savings. The numbers were solid. $180,000 in annual reductions without layoffs. The CEO, Peterson, nodded slowly while scribbling notes. CFO Martinez leaned back, clearly impressed by the detailed financial projections. Then Darren, my team leader for the past 18 months, cleared his throat and stood up. "Interesting idea," he said, flashing that practice smile I'd seen him use with difficult clients. "But let's be realistic here. This kind of thinking is exactly why some people aren't leadership material." The air in the room shifted. My cheeks burned as 20 colleagues turned to watch this public dismissal. Darren continued, his voice carrying that condescending tone he reserved for people he considered beneath him. "Don't get me wrong, the effort is appreciated. But real leaders need vision, not just spreadsheets and cost-cutting exercises. Leadership is about inspiring people, not finding ways to squeeze pennies." I forced myself to smile and nod, though my hands trembled slightly as I closed my laptop. Inside, something fundamental shifted. That night, I opened a new document on my personal computer and typed, "Professional Development Journal, Day 1. Below it, I documented every detail, Darren's exact words, the witnesses, the context, and my planned response. I wouldn't just prove him wrong. I'd show him what real leadership looked like. 3 weeks later, I sat in the same conference room watching Darren present what he called strategic operational improvements to the executive team. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were concepts we'd discussed extensively during our team meetings, ideas I'd researched and developed over months of analysis. He was clever about it, never directly plagiarizing my work, but skillfully reframing collaborative discussions as his own insights. When he mentioned innovative cost management approaches, I recognized my efficiency audit recommendations. When he discussed workflow optimization, those were Maya's process maps that I'd helped refine. These insights emerged from strategic team collaboration, Darren explained smoothly, positioning himself as the visionary leader who'd guided these discoveries. Director Martinez nodded approvingly, particularly when he presented financial projections that looked suspiciously similar to my original calculations. After the meeting, I found a new assignment memo on my desk. Internal Process Improvement Analyst. Darren's handwriting scrawled across official letterhead. The attached note read, "This role plays to your analytical strengths and attention to detail." On paper, it looked like a lateral move, maybe even a slight demotion from my previous project management responsibilities. But as I reviewed the job description, I realized something interesting. This position would give me access to operational data from every department, insight into company-wide inefficiencies, and direct interaction with managers across all divisions. Darren thought he was sidelining me. Instead, he'd given me a front-row seat to observe the entire organization. The process improvement role exceeded my expectations within the first month. I assembled a small but capable team, Alex from IT, whose database skills were legendary but underappreciated, Maya from design, who understood user experience better than anyone in the company, and Kevin from customer service, who knew every complaint and friction point our clients experienced. These were competent, dedicated people who'd been overlooked for flashier projects. Darren had dismissed them as support staff, but I recognized their potential immediately. Alex could identify system bottlenecks that cost thousands in lost productivity. Maya visualized process flows that revealed hidden inefficiencies. Kevin understood customer pain points that nobody else even knew existed. We worked systematically, analyzing workflows across departments. Maya discovered that our customer tracking system created artificial delays. Clients waited unnecessarily while information passed through redundant approval layers. Alex found security vulnerabilities and outdated integrations that slowed everything down. Kevin mapped complaint patterns that revealed systemic problems in our service delivery. When the company announced its annual innovation hackathon, we saw an opportunity to demonstrate our findings. Other teams focused on cutting-edge technology or flashy marketing concepts. We entered as Team Insight with a prototype addressing the customer tracking bottlenecks Maya had identified. Our solution was modest but functional, streamlined approval workflows, automated status updates, and integrated communication tools. While other teams presented impressive slide decks, we demonstrated actual working improvements to real business problems. When judges announced third place for our project, I felt genuinely proud. Not a dramatic victory, but meaningful recognition for solving practical problems. Several department managers approached us afterward, asking detailed questions about implementation possibilities. Darren congratulated us publicly, praising innovative thinking from our process improvement team. But I noticed his expression afterward. He looked like someone recalculating odds he'd thought were certain. Over the following months, I noticed Darren paying increasing attention to our process improvement work. He started attending our team meetings, something he'd never done before. He requested copies of our analysis reports for strategic planning purposes and asked detailed questions about our findings. Initially, I welcomed his interest. Perhaps he was finally recognizing the value of our systematic approach to organizational problems. But patterns emerged that made me uncomfortable. During leadership meetings, Darren began presenting insights that sounded remarkably similar to our team's discoveries. He was careful about attribution, never directly claiming our work as his own. Instead, he framed findings as observations from cross-departmental analysis or results of strategic team guidance. Technically accurate, but misleading about who had actually done the investigation and development work. When I raised concerns during a quarterly review with my direct supervisor, she seemed genuinely confused. Darren speaks very highly of your work, she assured me. He mentions the process improvement insights are gaining attention at senior levels. That response told me everything I needed to know. Credit for our work was reaching senior leadership, but the source attribution was becoming increasingly vague. Darren was positioning himself as the architect of improvements he hadn't conceived or developed. I began documenting everything more meticulously. Not secretly recorded conversations or hidden surveillance that would violate company policy and potentially state law. Instead, I maintained detailed notes of meetings, saved email chains chronologically, and ensured project timelines were clearly documented with individual contributions specified. If questions ever arose about who had done what work, I wanted comprehensive, professional documentation available. I started building relationships across departments more deliberately, not networking for personal advancement, but genuinely trying to understand different teams' operational challenges. These conversations revealed patterns that Darren, focused primarily on managing up to senior leadership, couldn't see from his position. Finance struggled with inconsistent budget reporting formats that made quarterly analysis unnecessarily complex. Marketing needed customer behavior data that existed in our systems but wasn't accessible through current reporting tools. Sales wanted lead tracking improvements that would help them prioritize prospects more effectively. Each department had developed workarounds for systemic problems, creating inefficiencies that compounded across the organization. I began connecting these dots, seeing how improvements in one area could cascade into benefits for multiple teams. During lunch with Kevin, he mentioned something that caught my attention. Williams in operations has been asking about our customer tracking prototype. Apparently, someone told him it could help with their efficiency issues. I hadn't spoken to Williams directly about our work. Someone else was sharing information about our projects, but I wasn't sure who or through what channels. This could be positive, our solutions finding their way to people who could benefit from them, but it also meant I had less control over how our work was being presented. The next week, I received an unexpected email from Williams requesting a brief meeting to discuss process optimization opportunities. His message was professional but vague about how he'd learned about our capabilities. Maybe our reputation was growing through informal channels, which could be valuable for future opportunities. Williams proved to be refreshingly direct during our meeting. He'd done his homework, understanding both our team's background and his department's specific challenges. Operations faced similar workflow bottlenecks to those we'd addressed in customer service, but with different stakeholders and more complex approval hierarchies. I've heard about improvements your team developed for customer tracking, he explained. Our operations team faces similar challenges with project status visibility and cross-departmental coordination. I demonstrated our prototype, walking through the logic behind our workflow simplifications and explaining how similar principles could apply to operations management. Williams asked intelligent questions about implementation complexity, training requirements, and integration with existing systems. "Would you be willing to pilot this approach in operations?" he asked. "Nothing official initially, just a small test with one project team to see if it works in practice." I agreed enthusiastically, with one clear stipulation. My team needed to be credited appropriately for the development work, and any results would acknowledge our methodology and contribution. Williams seemed surprised that I needed to specify this, which told me something about how other projects typically handled attribution. Over the next 6 weeks, we quietly implemented our process improvement approach with Williams' project team. The pilot was deliberately small-scale, 8 people working on facilities upgrade planning. We streamlined their approval workflows, implemented automated status tracking, and created clear communication protocols. The results exceeded expectations. 17% reduction in project timeline, fewer missed deadlines, and significantly improved visibility into task dependencies. Williams was pleased, and his team members appreciated the reduced administrative burden. "I'd like to document this as a case study for the quarterly operations review," Williams told me. "This deserves broader attention." Finally, I thought proper recognition for systematic work was coming through official channels. The operations case study generated more attention than I'd anticipated. Williams presented our pilot results at the quarterly review, clearly crediting our team's methodology and providing specific examples of improvement metrics. Department heads from facilities, procurement, and project management asked follow-up questions about applying similar approaches to their challenges. For the first time since joining the company, I felt like our work was gaining recognition through appropriate channels. Williams had been professional about attribution, and senior leadership was seeing concrete evidence of our capabilities. Then I learned that Darren had scheduled a presentation to the executive team about innovative operational solutions emerging from strategic team collaboration. The timing wasn't coincidental. His presentation was scheduled for the week following Williams' operations review. My stomach tightened as I realized what was happening. Darren was positioning himself to take credit for our operations success, just as he'd done with previous projects. But this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and the visibility was greater. I couldn't prevent his presentation without appearing petty or insubordinate, but I could prepare thoroughly. I gathered comprehensive documentation of our work, original development timelines, email discussions with Williams, the hackathon submission that had started everything, pilot test results, and detailed records of each team member's contributions. If technical questions arose during or after Darren's presentation, I wanted to ensure accurate information was available. Not to undermine him publicly, but to maintain factual clarity about who had developed what solutions and when. The night before his presentation, I reviewed everything twice, ensuring my documentation was complete and professionally organized. Darren's presentation was masterfully crafted. He spoke confidently about fostering innovation through strategic project assignment and empowering teams to discover creative solutions to organizational challenges. His slides showed impressive results from the operations pilot, with professional graphics and compelling metrics. Technically, everything he said was accurate. He had assigned me to process improvement work. Our team had developed innovative solutions. The results were genuinely impressive. But the presentation carefully obscured who had actually conceived, developed, and implemented the improvements. During the Q&A session, CTO Richards asked the question I'd been expecting. "Can we get more specific details about the system architecture and development methodology? I'd like to understand the technical implementation." Darren handled it smoothly, speaking generally about leveraging team expertise and collaborative development processes that maximize individual strengths. When Richards pressed for specifics about database design and workflow automation, Darren promised to follow up with detailed technical documentation. After the meeting, he approached me with unusual urgency. Gone was his typical casual confidence. He seemed genuinely concerned about delivering on his promise to the executive team. "I need you to put together comprehensive technical specifications for Richards," he said. "The executives want detailed documentation about the tracking system improvements and implementation methodology." I agreed to compile the information, understanding that this was my opportunity to ensure accurate attribution while providing the technical depth that Darren couldn't deliver. If senior leadership wanted specifics, they would get them. complete with proper credit for everyone involved. I spent the weekend preparing comprehensive documentation that told the complete story of our process improvement work. Everything was factual and professionally presented, but it clearly demonstrated who had conceived which ideas, developed what solutions, and implemented specific improvements. The timeline was particularly revealing. Initial problem identification during our hackathon project, Maya's workflow analysis, Alex's technical implementation, Kevin's user experience testing, and my coordination of the overall methodology. When presented chronologically with supporting evidence, it became clear where the innovations had actually originated. When I submitted the report to Darren on Monday morning, I watched his expression change as he skimmed through the detailed attribution sections. He seemed uncomfortable with the level of specificity about individual contributions and development timelines. "This is very thorough," he said carefully. "Maybe we should streamline it to focus more on outcomes rather than detailed process documentation." I politely declined, explaining that technical documentation required comprehensive attribution for future maintenance, development, and implementation across other departments. If other teams want to replicate these improvements, they'll need to understand exactly how each component was developed and who has expertise in specific areas. 2 weeks later, HR Director Walsh contacted me for what she described as an informal conversation about project attribution and development processes. Her tone was professional but suggested that someone had raised questions about inconsistencies between Darren's presentation and the technical documentation. "We're reviewing some project attribution questions," she explained during our meeting. "Nothing concerning or disciplinary, just ensuring that innovative work gets properly credited and that our documentation processes support future development." It seemed the executives had noticed discrepancies between Darren's general claims about strategic team collaboration and the specific technical details showing who had actually done the development work. Over the following months, I noticed subtle but significant changes in how projects were managed company-wide. New requirements for detailed documentation, clearer attribution guidelines for team projects, and increased emphasis on individual contribution tracking during performance reviews. The changes weren't dramatic or punitive, but they reflected an organizational recognition that proper credit for innovative work was important for both morale and future development. Williams mentioned during one of our regular check-ins that leadership seems more focused on understanding who's actually driving improvements rather than just who's presenting them. In this environment, Williams approached me with an expanded opportunity, leading a larger pilot program for process improvements across multiple departments. "Based on the documented success of the operations test and your team's proven methodology," he explained, "we'd like to scale this approach to facilities, procurement, and project management." The expanded pilot would put me in a more visible leadership role, with direct reporting to senior management and regular presentations to the executive team. It also meant potential conflict with Darren, whose traditional team leadership approach was quite different from the collaborative, documentation-focused methods I'd developed. I accepted the opportunity but requested specific protections: clear documentation of team member contributions, regular progress reviews with all stakeholders present, and written agreements about attribution and credit for any innovations developed during the program. Williams agreed immediately, understanding that these weren't unusual requests but professional standards that should have been in place already. The expanded pilot launched with modest expectations but solid preparation, clear success metrics, stakeholder buy-in, and comprehensive documentation processes from day one. The expanded pilot program showed consistent, measurable results across all 3 participating departments. Not revolutionary transformations, but reliable 15 to 20% improvements in processing time, error reduction, and workflow visibility. Department heads appreciated having concrete data about efficiency gains and cost savings. More importantly, the methodology proved transferable. Each department had unique challenges, but our systematic approach to identifying bottlenecks, streamlining approvals, and improving communication worked consistently across different contexts. Maya developed standardized assessment tools, Alex created adaptable technical frameworks, and Kevin designed training protocols that could be customized for different team cultures. During quarterly business reviews, several managers mentioned our process improvement work positively. I started receiving invitations to planning meetings where my input was genuinely valued, not just tolerated. Finance wanted my analysis of budget efficiency opportunities. Marketing asked for insights about customer experience improvements. Even HR consulted with me about onboarding process optimization. Darren's attitude toward me shifted noticeably during this period. He was less dismissive and more collaborative, but I sensed underlying tension as my role evolved beyond his direct control. He still supervised my day-to-day work officially, but the expanded pilot program gave me significant autonomy and direct access to senior management. When the company announced annual innovation awards, Williams and 2 other department heads nominated our process improvement work for recognition. "It's time this gets proper public acknowledgement," Williams told me. "The impact has been too significant to ignore." I felt honored but nervous about the visibility. Public recognition would make attribution questions unavoidable and put our work under scrutiny from across the organization. The Innovation Award process required detailed project submissions with comprehensive accountability documentation. Each team member's contributions needed to be specified, development timelines had to be verified, and measurable results required independent confirmation from multiple departments. Working with my team, I documented our methodology honestly and thoroughly. Maya's workflow analysis techniques, Alex's technical implementation approaches, Kevin's user experience improvements, and my coordination and strategic planning, everything was attributed accurately with supporting evidence. HR conducted individual interviews with team members to verify contributions and understand our development process. The review was thorough but fair, designed to ensure that recognition went to people who had actually done the innovative work rather than those who had simply presented it. Our project won the Process Innovation Award at the company's annual recognition ceremony. During my acceptance speech, I made sure to credit Alex, Maya, and Kevin specifically for their contributions, explaining how each person's expertise had been essential to our success. Darren attended the ceremony and congratulated us professionally afterward. His response was gracious, but I could see the strain. Public recognition with specific attribution made it difficult to maintain ambiguous claims about who had developed what innovations. After the ceremony, CTO Richards approached me privately. "Impressive work," she said. "I'd like to schedule a conversation about broader innovation opportunities and your professional development here." The conversation felt like a turning point, recognition from senior leadership based on documented performance rather than political maneuvering. My meeting with Richards was encouraging but realistically grounded. She explained that the company was exploring expanded innovation initiatives, but budget approvals and organizational changes would require careful planning and gradual implementation. "The process improvement program has proven its value," she said, "but scaling organizational change takes time. Keep developing your methodology, strengthen your team, and we'll identify opportunities as they emerge. Not an immediate promotion or dramatic advancement, but validation that my work was valued at senior levels and that future opportunities would be based on continued performance rather than political connections." Over the following 6 months, I focused on strengthening our process improvement program methodically. We expanded to 2 additional departments, refined our assessment and implementation tools, and developed training materials that other teams could use to implement similar improvements independently. The work was satisfying and the results continued to be solid, but progress felt appropriately incremental rather than dramatically accelerated. Real organizational change was slower than I'd initially hoped, but more sustainable than quick fixes or politically motivated promotions. Richards checked in with me quarterly, reviewing our results and discussing lessons learned. These conversations helped me understand how senior leadership viewed innovation initiatives and what qualities they valued in potential leaders: consistency, measurable results, team development, and strategic thinking rather than flashy presentations or political maneuvering. About 14 months after the initial conference room confrontation, organizational restructuring announcements changed the trajectory of my career significantly. The company was creating a dedicated innovation and process improvement department to formalize and expand the work we'd been doing across multiple divisions. Richards called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. "We'd like you to lead the new innovation department," she said directly. "It's a management position reporting to my office, with budget authority and hiring responsibilities." The role came with a meaningful promotion, increased salary, and the opportunity to formalize methodologies we developed informally. More importantly, It represented recognition for sustained competence rather than political maneuvering or dramatic confrontations. I accepted the position, understanding that this advancement was the result of 18 months of consistent performance, documented results, and professional relationship building. Maya and Alex chose to join the new department, excited about expanded opportunities. Kevin decided to remain in customer service, but agreed to serve as a key liaison and consultant. Darren's reaction was professionally appropriate but personally complex. He congratulated me publicly during team meetings and privately in a brief conversation. While he maintained his composure, I could sense his frustration with the changing organizational dynamics and his reduced influence over my career trajectory. The new department launched with realistic expectations and solid foundation. Proven methodologies, supportive relationships across divisions, established success metrics, and clear reporting structures to senior leadership. Leading the Innovation and Process Improvement Department brought challenges I hadn't fully anticipated. Building formal organizational structures, managing budgets, hiring qualified staff, and reporting regularly to senior leadership required skills I was still developing through experience. However, the foundation was remarkably solid. We had methodologies that worked consistently across different contexts, positive relationships with department heads who had seen our results, and clear metrics that demonstrated value to the organization. More importantly, we had senior leadership support based on documented performance rather than promises or potential. My relationship with Darren evolved into something more professionally mature during this transition. He focused on traditional team leadership responsibilities while I managed innovation initiatives. When projects overlapped between our areas, we collaborated effectively without the earlier tension or competitiveness. 6 months into leading the new department, my team had successfully implemented process improvements in 12 departments with consistent results, average efficiency gains of 18%, reduced error rates, and improved employee satisfaction scores related to workflow clarity and administrative burden. The recognition felt good professionally, but more importantly, the work felt meaningful. We were solving real organizational problems, helping colleagues be more effective in their roles, and contributing measurably to company success. The revenge I'd initially imagined, dramatic confrontation or public vindication, had evolved into something more valuable: professional growth, meaningful work, and the satisfaction of building something that made a genuine difference. As our department's reputation for effective innovation grew, opportunities emerged beyond the company. Industry publications featured articles about our methodology, conference organizers invited me to speak about systematic process improvement, and other companies requested consultations about implementing similar approaches. The external recognition was gratifying, but I was more focused on continuing to develop our internal capabilities. We hired 2 additional analysts, established partnerships with academic researchers studying organizational efficiency, and created formal training programs that other companies began adopting. Darren eventually transferred to a different division where his traditional leadership style was better suited to the team culture and business requirements. Our relationship improved significantly once we weren't in direct competition or overlapping authority structures. He even referred colleagues to our innovation department when they encountered process improvement challenges. The confrontational dynamic from our early interaction had evolved into mutual professional respect, which felt more constructive and mature than ongoing conflict. We understood that different leadership approaches could be effective in different contexts, and that personal conflicts weren't necessary when professional roles were clearly defined. During a company leadership retreat 18 months after my promotion, Darren approached me during a networking break. "I want to acknowledge something," he said. "I was wrong about your leadership potential. You've developed exactly the kind of systematic thinking this company needed." His recognition felt more valuable than any dramatic revenge scenario I'd originally imagined. 2 years and 3 months after that initial humiliation in the conference room, I received notification of promotion to Senior Director of Innovation and Organizational Development. The role included broader responsibilities across multiple divisions, representation on strategic planning committees, and input into company-wide operational decisions. During the promotion announcement at the quarterly leadership meeting, CEO Peterson specifically mentioned my consistent demonstration of leadership through systematic innovation, measurable results, and collaborative team development. The recognition focused on sustained performance rather than dramatic achievements, which reflected the professional culture I'd worked to establish. I thought about Darren's original words. This kind of thinking is exactly why some people aren't leadership material. He hadn't been maliciously wrong, just narrow in his understanding of what effective leadership looked like in our organizational context. Real leadership, I learned, wasn't commanding presence or political maneuvering. It was identifying problems systematically, developing sustainable solutions, building capable teams, and delivering measurable results consistently over time. These weren't glamorous or dramatically visible qualities, but they were more valuable than impressive presentations or politically motivated promotions. The promotion came with increased salary, expanded authority, and the opportunity to influence organizational strategy at senior levels. But the most satisfying aspect was knowing that advancement was based on documented competence rather than politics or personal relationships. At the annual company leadership retreat, I presented our innovation program's comprehensive impact. Process improvements implemented in 22 departments, average efficiency gains of 21%, cost savings exceeding $340,000 annually, and consistent employee satisfaction improvements in workflow and administrative areas. The presentation focused on systematic methodology rather than individual achievements, demonstrating how sustainable organizational change required careful analysis, gradual implementation, and continuous refinement rather than dramatic interventions or revolutionary solutions. After the presentation, several colleagues approached me about applying our process improvement methods to their specific departmental challenges. The demand was encouraging, but I was careful to manage expansion sustainably rather than overcommitting our team's capacity or compromising quality standards. Darren attended the retreat as a department head in his new division. During the networking session, he approached me with genuine warmth rather than professional politeness. Our conversation was comfortable and focused on mutual professional interests rather than past conflicts. "I owe you a more complete apology," he said toward the end of our discussion. "I misjudged not just your potential, but what leadership looks like in this environment. You've built exactly the kind of systematic approach to improvement that creates lasting value." His acknowledgement felt genuinely meaningful because it came from understanding rather than obligation or social pressure. The innovation program continued expanding, but growth was managed carefully to maintain effectiveness and team cohesion. We hired additional staff selectively, developed comprehensive training programs for new team members, and established formal partnerships with universities studying organizational efficiency. My team grew to 15 people, including several former members of various departments who had transferred voluntarily over time. Not sudden mass departures from any single area, but gradual movement of people whose skills and interests aligned with systematic process improvement work. The work environment we'd created was collaborative rather than competitive, with people contributing ideas freely, sharing credit appropriately, and supporting each other's professional development. Team members knew their contributions were valued and documented, which encouraged innovation and risk-taking within professional boundaries. Recognition came through multiple channels: industry publications, professional conferences, academic research partnerships, and internal company awards. But the most meaningful validation was seeing former colleagues succeed in their own roles using methods and tools our team had developed. Maya had become our lead methodology developer, creating assessment frameworks that other companies were adapting. Alex managed our technical infrastructure and consulted with IT departments across multiple organizations. Kevin, still in customer service but closely connected to our work, had become a recognized expert in user experience optimization. 3 years and 8 months after the initial conflict, I was offered the vice president position overseeing innovation, process development, and organizational efficiency. The promotion represented significant advancement in responsibility, compensation, and strategic influence within the company. I accepted the role understanding that this achievement resulted from sustained effort, documented performance, and professional relationship building rather than dramatic confrontations or political maneuvering. The vindication wasn't public humiliation of former adversaries, but personal and professional growth that demonstrated capabilities through consistent results. During my first executive leadership meeting, I realized I was now senior to everyone who had witnessed that original conference room dismissal. The advancement had come through competence and persistence rather than politics or revenge, which made the achievement more meaningful and sustainable. The VP role included responsibilities I was still learning: strategic planning, budget management across multiple departments, representation to board committees, and influence over company-wide operational policies. But the foundation was solid: proven methodologies, strong team relationships, and senior leadership confidence based on documented track record. My office overlooked the conference room where Darren had originally dismissed my leadership potential. The physical symbolism was satisfying, but more important was knowing that the career progression had been earned through professional excellence rather than personal vendetta. As VP, I had opportunities to influence hiring, promotion, and development decisions across multiple departments. I focused on identifying people with demonstrated competence regardless of their current recognition levels, remembering clearly how it felt to have potential overlooked or dismissed. The innovation program became a model that other companies studied and adapted. We received industry recognition, speaking invitations at professional conferences, and consulting requests from organizations seeking to implement systematic process improvement approaches. Success was shared appropriately across the entire team, with everyone receiving recognition for their specific contributions to our collective achievements. Maya led methodology development, Alex managed technical implementation, and our expanded team included specialists in training, assessment, and change management. Darren and I maintained a positive professional relationship that had evolved far beyond our original conflict. He had found success leading a traditional operations team using management approaches that suited his strengths and the division's requirements. Our early disagreement had developed into mutual respect for different leadership styles that could be effective in different organizational contexts. During a company-wide innovation showcase, Darren stopped by our presentation booth. "It's remarkable what you've built," he said, reviewing our methodology documentation and results summary. "This systematic approach creates the kind of sustainable change that actually improves how people work." Looking back on the journey from that initial dismissal to VP-level leadership, I realized the most important lessons weren't about revenge or vindication. The experience had taught me about persistence, professional documentation, relationship building, and the patience required to create meaningful organizational change. The conference room where Darren had declared me not leadership material was now regularly used for innovation team meetings, training sessions, and strategic planning discussions. Every time I entered that space, I remembered his words, but without anger or resentment. They had motivated me to understand what leadership actually meant in our organizational context. Real leadership wasn't dramatic presentations or political maneuvering. It was identifying problems systematically, developing sustainable solutions, building effective teams, and delivering measurable results consistently over time. These qualities were less visible than commanding presence or inspirational speeches, but more valuable for creating lasting organizational improvement. The promotion to VP had come with increased salary, expanded authority, and opportunities to influence company strategy at the highest levels. But personal satisfaction came from knowing that advancement was based on documented competence rather than politics, relationships, or dramatic confrontations. Years later, when new employees or junior colleagues asked about career development and leadership advancement, I shared the principles I'd learned through experience. Focus on delivering measurable value, document your contributions comprehensively, build genuine professional relationships, and trust that sustained good work eventually receives appropriate recognition. I rarely mentioned the original confrontation with Darren or framed career advice in terms of overcoming dismissive colleagues. Those stories were less important than the systematic approach to professional development: competence, documentation, relationship building, and persistence over time. The innovation program continued growing and evolving with new challenges, achievements, and team members. We maintained the culture of collaboration and appropriate attribution that made the work meaningful and encouraged people to contribute their best efforts without fear of having their contributions overlooked or misappropriated. Industry recognition continued through publications, conferences, and consulting opportunities. But the most valuable validation came from seeing organizational improvements that made colleagues' work more efficient, less frustrating, and more aligned with their professional skills and interests. The innovation program's impact extended beyond process improvements to influence company culture more broadly. Other departments adopted our documentation practices, attribution standards, and collaborative development approaches. Senior leadership began emphasizing systematic analysis and measurable results over presentation skills and political relationships. I occasionally encountered situations similar to my original experience with Darren, competent people being underestimated, overlooked, or having their contributions minimized by colleagues in more visible positions. In those cases, I tried to provide the support, opportunities, and recognition I had wished for during my own professional challenges. Maya, Alex, and Kevin had all advanced significantly in their careers, using skills developed during our early collaboration to succeed in expanded roles. Seeing their growth and knowing that our team environment had contributed to their professional development was more satisfying than any personal achievement or recognition. The systematic approach to organizational improvement that we developed continued proving its value across different contexts and challenges. Other companies implemented adapted versions of our methodology, academic researchers studied our results, and industry publications featured our approaches as examples of effective change management. Today, leading a team of 52 innovation and process improvement professionals across multiple divisions, I'm reminded daily that effective leadership isn't about dramatic confrontations, political maneuvering, or proving superiority over former adversaries. Real leadership means creating environments where competent people can do their best work, ensuring that contributions are recognized appropriately, and building systems that support sustainable organizational improvement over time. These aren't glamorous or dramatically visible qualities, but they create lasting value for both individuals and organizations. Darren's original dismissal of my leadership potential had been wrong, but not maliciously so. He had simply operated with a different understanding of what leadership looked like in our professional context. By proving him wrong through sustained performance rather than confrontation or revenge, I had learned something more valuable than vindication: what leadership actually meant and how it could be developed systematically. The shadow file from those early days sits archived now, evidence of a journey from dismissal to recognition that happened through professional excellence rather than dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the most effective response to being underestimated isn't proving someone wrong publicly, but proving yourself right through consistent competence and patient persistence. The sweetest professional vindication is building something more valuable than anyone initially thought possible, including yourself, and knowing that success came through merit rather than politics, revenge, or personal conflict.